It started off as a complaint about black sticky mold that was pervasive in that neighborhood. And we tried to explain to them that we had already had it tested through URI, and it came back as a naturally occurring environmental issue that would run its course, and it would be less and less in scope as the years went by because it was attributed to a certain insect and that insect's droppings. My town manager lives in that neighborhood. He actually brought in a chair cover for us to look at a town council meeting so we could see exactly what the citizens group was talking about.
And what did you think when you saw it?
Looks like black sticky mold. That's what it feels like. It almost feels like a petroleum product when you rub your finger across it. We hired and gave that contract to Sage Environmental. And they did a 9-month to a 1-year study. They did some studies when the plants weren't running because the asphalt plants usually shut down around November 15th. So they did some baseline readings over the winter and at times like that. And then they started testing as soon as the plants opened back up for operation in the spring. They started testing again. And they sent us a very comprehensive report and clearly indicated that the results were the same as we had gotten from URI in the past, that it was a naturally occurring substance due to this infestation of this insect. It was actually, the brown sticky mold was actually adhering to the insect's droppings, the insect excrement, and that the insects would run a natural cycle, and as soon as their numbers dwindled and they started dying off in their natural cycle, then the black sticky mold would go away or would decrease.
You've lived in Coventry your whole life.
I've been here for 54 years.
Had you ever heard of this occurring in any part of town before?
No, I had not. Of course, with that being said, I've only been on the council for 3 years. So, I mean, why would I? DEM has been involved. DEM has done testing and can find no violations. Our Planning and Zoning Enforcement Department has done investigations and can find no violations. The Central Coventry Fire District Fire Marshal has been over to both asphalt plants and done inspections and hasn't found any violations. It's my understanding that Jack Chartier's office, the State Fire Marshal, has been to the property and done their own inspections and can't find any violations. So
what do you make of all the ruckus?
I work construction for a living. I've done a lot of asphalt in my life. The manufacturing of asphalt puts a smell in the air. It's a petroleum-based product. It emits an odor. My zoning enforcement officer will tell you that if you stand on the side of Airport Road while a loaded truck goes out, you can smell the truck go by. But he's been on site, DEM's been on site while the plants were running, taking samples, and no one can find any violations, you know. So does it create an odor? Yes. Is it I've lived next door to American Hirsch Chemical my entire life. I know all about manufacturing facilities that create odors at certain times. I know all about that, you know, and it is an inconvenience. This industrial zone has been in Coventry for a long, long, long time, long before those homes were built up there, or the majority of those homes were built up there.
People who have been there for, let's say, almost a decade or longer said when they moved in, the operation that was there is a lot different than the operation that's there now.
It's always been an industrial zone. There's always been asphalt manufacturing on that property. Whether it was a pug mill that was making coal patch
as opposed to hot asphalt. But what's your reaction to that there was an expansion without the approval by the town?
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I mean, I've got a zoning and planning department right across the street in the town hall annex, and they have never stepped up and said, well, no, Mr. President, that's true, that there was never a permit given, there was never any.
Well, the people I've talked to said they put in public records requests, and their response from the zoning officer that they talked to was, we had a flood at some point and we've lost records. Have you ever heard about a flood?
Yeah,
And what was that?
We used MacArthur Boulevard, the building on that the town owns on MacArthur Boulevard down here in Coventry. We used the basement of that as a storage facility for a long time.
For the older
records.
documents.
For the older documents. And during the historic floods, when the bridge collapsed on Laurel Avenue here in Coventry, the basement of that building completely flooded out. There was water running out the basement doors.
So March 2010.
Correct.
Okay, so
Correct.
that answered that there was a flood. There could have been some of those documents?
Absolutely could have been some of those
Are you
documents.
convinced, are you confident that they went through the proper approvals to get, because you would agree that the hot asphalt plant now is a lot different than the coal
Right,
plant.
I agree.
Different
that,
use, different.
But that switchover, that changeover was done back in the late '60s, early '70s.
No,
That
they're talking about
changeover was
expansion
done.
that happened
No.
from
What
the
they're
time
talking
since
about,
Maiozzi bought the place.
What they're talking about is the fact that there was always Coventry asphalt there,
Right.
and then Tommy Maiozzi moved his portable plant into the same property.
Or what about Cody's cozy because he's in that business, and he's he's looking the other way. He's not protecting us because he's protecting the business.
Listen, they're not. It hasn't been that. It hasn't
heard
been
that.
that polite.
Okay.
It hasn't been that polite. I've been accused of having a conflict of interest because I work in the construction field. I've been told that myself and my vice president, Mr. McGee, who's a heavy equipment operator out of Local 57, that we should both be recusing ourselves from any issues that have to do with the asphalt plants in the town of Coventry because we work in the construction business.
What do you say to that?
And we're cozy with them. Well, my response to that is people who live in the town of Coventry that are in the education field shouldn't be voting on the Coventry town budget because the Coventry town budget funds education in the town of Coventry, and they could be directly affected by that, so maybe they should be recusing themselves from the budget vote. Now, you and I both know that's utterly ridiculous and it's not going to happen, and I will not, under any circumstances, recuse myself from a vote that I know I do not have a conflict of interest on. That's not going to happen. Just because I've been in the construction business for as many years as I have doesn't automatically disqualify me from being qualified or objective enough to have my input on a vote for a town that I was elected to represent.
But if they were to move, are you concerned about losing that tax revenue?
Of course I am. Of course I am. If I wasn't, I shouldn't be sitting on the council. I mean, as the council president, Jim, and maybe this sounds a little far-fetched for some people, but as the council president, I consider myself as the head fiduciary for the taxpayers in the town of Coventry. And I am concerned about you losing that base, that income, that revenue stream for the town of Coventry. So I don't think the asphalt plants are creating health issues. I think they can be, there's a possibility that they're contributing to existing health issues that some of these elderly people already have or have had for a long time. I think that's a possibility, and I think that's an issue that this town is going to have to address should someone produce the evidence that that is actually happening. And I've tried to relate that to the case people. If you will give us something to work with, something, get us a violation from DEM on a health issue, get us a violation, we will act on it. The council is not shirking its responsibilities. We will act on it. But you can't sanction somebody who hasn't done anything wrong yet. Like I told you the other day on the phone, if you guys leave here today and you go down 117, the speed limit's 35 miles an hour, by the way, and a Coventry police officer pulls you over and he writes you a ticket for speeding and he says, no, I know you're only doing 35, but the next time you come through town, you're going to be doing 40 and I know it, but I might not see you. You're not going to take that ticket lying down. You're going to fight it all the way because you're being punished for something you didn't do. You're being sanctioned for something you did not do. That's what Case is asking us to do with the asphalt plants. Sanction them and limit how they operate in the town of Coventry, yet we can't prove to you they've done anything wrong. We can't prove to you they're doing anything wrong. We can't prove to you they're going to do anything wrong in the future. But we want you to do this now because we think it's best for us.